I looked at it like a few months ago, and then coming back to it now, I'm like, everything that didn't click before is like really clear now.
I think Dara was trying to figure out how to use the import RE and then trying to use those methods. Once you figure those out, it was pretty easy. So all we had to do was use one of those dictionaries to find out what characters you needed. I don't think anyone's going to memorize all those regex things, so yeah, it's just a matter of looking it up and knowing what to look for, I think.
Yeah, I think.
So some of them, like the question mark, I'm still confused. Like if you put it before, it's got a different meaning. If you put it after, it's got a different meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, so some of the complaints we've seen here are that it's a little inconsistent sometimes, like things like the question mark. You put it at the end of the end of a string, that's one thing, but if you put it before a character, that means something else. Yeah. So the good news is that at no point in your lives are you going to have to do regex from memory. If you ever need to do regex for any reason, you can always look it up. I never met anybody who just intuitively knows regex, but it is still a very useful tool, especially if you're working with, I think Tom showed you some good use cases yesterday of validating things like phone numbers, email addresses, things like that. So if you're working with text manipulation at all, chances are regex is going to come into play at least once. So we're going to review the validate phone method challenge from yesterday. I'm going to open up validate phone. So this one was nice enough to come with unit tests already written for us. That's cool. And so we just have a series of functions we need to complete in order to pass all of our tests. It's pretty straightforward, it looks like. So let's start one after the other. So just going up from the very beginning of this, we're already missing something from this page that we're going to need in order to pass all of these.
Import.
Yeah, we need to import. Yeah, we need to import the RE library. That's Python's built-in regex library. And one thing that's always good to do whenever you're working with a library that you're unfamiliar with is read the docs. So if I do Python RE documentation, here's the official Python docs. So they have a lot of stuff here, a lot of different methods, some talking about how regex works. So we can refer back to this whenever we're not sure exactly what kind of method we want to use in order to do what we want to do. All right, so first method, has phone number, takes an input string, and we have a comment here that says, does a string contain a phone number? All right, so based on that, what is the expected return value of this before we even look at the spec tests? True or false?
Binary.
Yeah, binary or a Boolean. It's looking for some kind of truthy or falsy return value. All right, so based on that, let's go with Devin. What regex method would be good for this, do you think?
Was it FindAll?
FindAll? We can try that one. So I can do a Control F here for FindAll. Let's take a look at it. So here it says, return all non-overlapping matches of pattern in string as a list of strings. The string is scanned left to right, and matches are returned in the order found. If one or more groups are present in the pattern, return a list of groups. This will be a list of tuples if the pattern is more than one group. Empty matches are included in the results. Okay, cool. So let's try this method out. So we're going to say re.findAll. And we know it takes a pattern. Let's just put that there for that. And it's going to take input string as its second argument. So the question is, what is our pattern? So we need to find a valid phone number. And if we look at this, it's looking for a numbers separated by dashes format as valid. And one thing we can always do if we're unsure about where to look, if I can find my mouse, that is. There we go. Is if we want to reference regex, my favorite, there's a lot of different websites like this. My favorite one is Rubular, which although it's a Ruby one, the regex expressions are still the same. So we can put a test string. So like 111, 867, 5, 309. So this is our test string. This is what we want to match. Something with this pattern. So without even worrying about the regex yet, let's not even talk about what type of regex we want. What's the pattern that we need to find?
3 numbers dash 3 numbers dash 4 numbers.
Yeah. So 3 numbers dash 3 numbers dash 4 numbers. So if we look down here, there's a few things that references that can help us. Just kind of taking a look real quick. Does anyone see anything here that can really just figure out, oh, wait, this can get us anything we need for when it comes to numbers? Yeah, backslash lowercase d right here gives us any digit. Perfect, right? Any digit can be a valid regex expression. So that matches every single number. But we want to make sure it starts with 3 numbers, right? So how do we specify that it's 3 numbers exactly? Yep. The curly brackets with 3 inside. So that matches every 3 numbers put together. Let's put a few numbers that shouldn't be matched here just to figure it out, like make sure it doesn't work. So if I just do that, that shouldn't be a match at all. If I do it like this, that shouldn't be a match. That shouldn't be a match. So right now we're finding something to match in all 4 of these. We only want to match something in the first one. All right, so we got a D3. What comes next? Yep, just a dash. And in this case, it's 3 digits again. We don't really have to change anything. Yep, dash again. Yep, and D4. So that will get us exactly this pattern. 3 digits, dash 3 digits, dash 4 digits. So we can copy it, put it in here. Before I talk about anything else, does anyone know what this R I put here stands for?
Replace. It's
Replace?
raw. It's raw string.
Yeah. So we don't need to put 2 dashes.
Put 2 what, sorry?
2. Otherwise, we have to put 2 dashes in front of the D to make it understand like it's actually where it is.
Yeah. So put the slashes? Yeah, so we could do that. So
slashes.
yeah. So yeah, so this R here does stand for a raw string in Python. We look that up. What's the difference between a raw string and a regular string? So a Python raw string is created by prefixing a string with a little r or r. It treats backslash as a literal character. This is useful when we don't want to have a string that contains backslash and don't want to treat it as an escape character. So in other, like when we're talking about, that's the new line character. A regular Python string will just kind of treat that as a line break. But when we're doing something like searching through regex, we want to treat the new line characters as part of the string, which is why we put R there to say this is a raw string. Don't escape. This is not an escape character. Read this literally. All right, so we have read.findAll pattern input string. So we can actually print this out, see exactly what we get. So now I do as phone number. Let's do one that should be a match. and one that isn't. Let's see what happens. So if I do Python validate phone, I can't see, one sec. There we go. So one gave us an array with the matching number, and one gave us an empty array. That's great, but so what we need to return though is true or false, right? So what's a way we can how do we determine if we get
Dot search does true false. It doesn't return the actual value; it just says if it's there.
dot search?
Yeah, the re.search instead of using FindAll.
Yes, let's try that out. See what happens.
Just return dot search.
Yeah, it should just return if it's there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I didn't know that downs could do that. I know some of the other ones.
Yeah, we could test it out. So I'm running this code again, just trying out research. So
At least it's a truthy value versus the false value. Yeah. So
yeah, so this
it worked for the test of whether it was true or false.
yeah, so on a match it gave us a match object, and if I take out this dash here, it should give us something else. It gives us none. So in this case, yeah, that gives us a truthy value and a falsy value. Does everyone know what I mean when I'm talking about truthy and falsy versus true and false?
No.
No? Okay, that's great. So, all right, I'm going to open up a Python shell real quick to demonstrate.
Is that like a Python thing?
It's not just a Python thing. This is a coding thing in general.
Oh, okay.
So when we talk about Boolean values, of course, we have true and we have false, right? Those are true and false. But oftentimes, we'll want to be able to test if something exists without it necessarily being true or false. So every coding language has different standards of what is considered to be truthy and what is considered to be falsy. So if something is truthy, it will evaluate to true. If something is falsy, it will evaluate to false. So that allows us to do things like, do things like this. So let's say, I'm going to say string equals blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to say if string print truthy. So string, I didn't say is string equal to this. I didn't check the length of string or anything like that. I just said if string, and there's an implicit equal equals true there whenever you put an if statement. And it said yes. Let's try to repeat that if string is empty. And different coding languages will handle this differently. So it didn't print anything, because an empty string is considered to be falsy. And we can even just try, I wonder what happens if I just do this, for example. I'm not sure exactly what Python will tell us if I try to do that. Okay, so it won't evaluate to being true, but it is truthy enough for an eval statement to work. So generally speaking, any object that has any actual value will evaluate to truthy. Empty strings will evaluate to falsy. I believe 0 will evaluate to falsy. None evaluates to falsy. I bet there's a guide online that has like a more comprehensive list of this, because that's one thing that'll be confusing as you go ahead with many things is different coding languages and handle truthiness and falsiness differently. So I do Python, what is truthy? There's a Medium article. This is okay, it's a whole video it looks like, but maybe they summarize it. Yeah, so they have some values in Python inherently false, hence they are called falsy values. For example, an empty object is a falsy value inherently. Empty string, none, 0. So
it's basically if it contains something or it doesn't contain something.
yeah, usually. So in this particular case, and we can actually test this, the difference between using FindAll and search, they may actually both might work because that depends on if an empty array is considered truthy or falsy. And we can test that out right now, right? So you could say if empty array so an empty array is considered falsy. So there we go. I'm going to clear the screen. So we could use search or FindAll. Either way, we're going to get either a truthy or falsy value. So I think we already have read.findAll here. And FindAll returns an array of strings, which is a lot more helpful for our needs than a match object, because that's a type of object that it's like a little confusing to work with. So let's just return this. Now if I run the tests on, what's it called, validate phone spec. And one thing you can do as well, if you want to make a little bit clear about which tests are running at any point, you can add -v, stands for verbose. And it'll tell you kind of exactly what's happening with every test, and also all the names of the tests and how they all failed. But when you so when we say get phone number with a bad number, you should get none. When you call has phone number with a bad phone number, you should get false. When you call has phone number with a legitimate phone number, you should get true. Okay. So it passed. So that seems to be working. Any questions about how this particular method has worked?
No, but what was that command with the -v again?
So if you add -v at the end of running a test, that calls the verbose version, which has more, which gives you more information, and is sometimes easier to read.
So we are returning an array, right?
Yep.
So, but even we are just returning an array because it's truthy, that's why it is evaluating as passing the test case on this one.
Yep. Because if we look at the phone spec test, so they're not using assert equal has phone number and true. They're using assert true. And assert true just checks for truthiness. So maybe we're not passing the spirit of the test here, but we are passing the test. And we've made a method that passes the test and has a lot of more functionality. So now we have get phone number. So get phone number. So you notice we have one that's called get phone number and get all phone numbers. So our has phone number actually has the same functionality as get all phone numbers. So we can kind of skip that one and just go straight to return get phone number with the input string.
The test was a little different. Yeah.
Oh, we better test. We better check that
one
then.
One wants a none if you don't have any. The other one wants an empty array.
Yeah.
These tests made me look like a bad coder, like because they were so specific and not, it's like return a string of all these numbers. It's like when you would never do that.
Yep. So
I mean, I guess how should we proceed when that comes along? Because I'd rather write a smarter method.
Rather than test yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like,
So you want to store numbers as numbers or not as students?
maybe this is an offline conversation, but it's kind of like how to proceed with testing in the future when, like, I know how to write the smarter method, but like the test is asking, it was asking for like concatenated string, comma separated values of
Mhm.
of numbers at the end. It's like that's not machine useful. Like, you know, I guess do I rewrite the test
All right. So
and submit that file too?
So that's actually a very good question. So what Justin was asking is, if you're given a spec file that's asking for something that, for whatever reason to you, doesn't make any sense, like, for example, instead of returning, like, am I giving this right? Returning like a list of numbers instead of returning a string separated by commas, that doesn't make sense. Then should you do what the test says, or should you rewrite the test to reflect what you think is better? And I'm going to say err on the side of doing what the test wants, because depending on the field you go into and the company you work for, sometimes you're going to have requirements that to you make no sense. Like, why would we do it this way? I don't know. And if you have concerns about that, definitely bring them up to your senior developer or the client or whoever it makes sense to talk to about that. But changing it on your own without telling anybody is likely to get you in trouble. So that it is sometimes kind of a problem with the business is, as coders, we often work with people who do not have the same grounding in the field that we do. However, we need to be able to work with them in such a way as to make sure everything works well and that they understand what we're doing and we understand what they want. So I would err on the side of pass the test as written, and then maybe also, if you'd rather have your own method that returns it, returns something else, you can do that too. You can never have too many methods after all. That's a good question. All right, so going back to the get all phone numbers method. So it says when we call one get all phone numbers, you get all the phone numbers back. So it's an array of phone numbers. And this says when you get all phone numbers with no phone numbers, you get an empty array back. And as we saw, search all or find all, that's what it does. So we've kind of combined our has phone number and get all phone number methods together. And that's okay. I'm not too worried about that right now. So if I run the tests, all of those two suites of tests should pass. I gotta find the ones that are doing that. So gotta find get all phone numbers. Uh-oh, looks like it actually failed.
You don't have your RegEx.
So I called on the get phone number method that we already defined, and that one has the pattern. So, but let's take a look and see if we can get, or did I go, wait, I scrolled too far up. Let's try that.
Comment out some of the tests.
Isn't it has phone number?
You're right, it is. So that's why it was failing. Well, that might be. So I'm going to clear the screen. Oops, did it twice. So get all phone numbers. Pass comes back okay. Or test comes back okay. All right. So let's talk about get phone number, which gets a phone number back for stream and only one phone number. And if we look at this, get phone number should either return, so that's has phone number, get phone number should either return, in this case, the a string with the number or none. So we can't do any kind of little hackiness with truthiness and falsiness here. It's looking for two very different things. Exactly a string or none. So how do we get just one phone number? What's a regex method we can use?
Do find is that FindAll? Is it a search? Search and group?
Still use the same method. You just have to put it
Or-
or statements in there. Like if what I did was just if the length of that array is greater than 0, it returns. Otherwise, it returns.
Or you could do group. So you group together the ones that you're searching for. Search.
Yep, so if we take a look at some methods. So there is one called search, which says scan through string for the first location where the regular expression pattern produces a match and return a corresponding match object. Return none if no position in the string matches the pattern. So in this particular case, it does return none if it doesn't find it, which is something we want. And it returns a match object. So we're gonna have to learn a little bit about what match objects are, but it does look like that this may be the method that'll help us out here. So first off, the pattern should be the same, right? We're not really changing anything about what a phone number looks like. And we can say something like match equals re.search, and takes in pattern and input string. And so we could say if match, meaning if match isn't none, then we need to kind of extract the string from our match object. So match.expand, it has a few methods here, returns a string obtained by doing backslash substitution on the template string templates as done by the sub method. So I'm not sure exactly that's what we want. They also have groups, returns one or more subgroups of the match. If there's a single argument, the result is a single string. There are multiple arguments, the result is a tuple with one item per argument. So they have trying to find Isaac Newton. M group 0 gives you Isaac Newton. M group 1 gives you Isaac. M group 2 gives you Newton. So I feel like this might be the way to do it. So I could say if match return match.group 0 should give us the first match, which should be a number. Else we return none. Does that look good to everybody?
So I'll be honest, like this Python syntax, in terms when it comes to RegEx, kind of confuses me a lot. Like, what is that? Why is it a search? And then why do we have a group in that object? I mean, I know you just have to kind of accept it as it is, but it sounds like some other languages are a little bit more intuitive when they do, let's say, find, replace all, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So,
Yes, he was saying that Python's regex library isn't very intuitive, and it's not really clear why it does certain things the way it does. For example, why the search method returns a match object rather than just the string we're looking for. And I don't really have an answer about why it does things a particular way. This is how they chose to do it. It is done in a very object-oriented way. As you can probably tell, giving us a match object, a custom class that they created rather than just a string. I'm sure there are advantages that they found to that, to storing things in that method in that way. Maybe not how I would have designed it, but it is what we have to work with.
So the group 0 means basically the first match.
Yes, and if we want to, we could also, we can actually print that out and go, we print match, oops, not print dot. Print match dot groups. We should see all of the matches that it finds. So if I do get phone number, and the string is you should get, let's see what what actually comes out. Just running Python validate phone.py. Interesting. So we didn't actually get anything there. What if I do groups 0? Okay. So we've encountered a problem. This should be a valid match, right? And yet we are not, instead we are getting an empty array. Or, now the question is, why? Because if I'm gonna try change just to print match, because we do know if it's not there, it's supposed to return none. That's what the documentation said. But we do get a match object. It actually shows the match there. So it looks like the .group thing may be not the way to go. So we caught that early. So let's find the match object again. Seeing something in the chat just popped up. No group. Siobhan, do you want to expand on what you mean by that? So that got a parentheses there. All right, so the pattern has parentheses. Oh, I think you mean putting the entire thing in parentheses like this?
Oh, right.
Let's see if that changes anything. Because parentheses in regex means it is putting something in a group. Ah. Okay. So groups, it now gave us a tuple with that in there. And if I do group 0, that gives us what we want. Yeah, so parentheses are something we could add to regex, and they have a little very short explanation here. Capture everything enclosed, and that allows you to put things into groups. So that's why we're doing that. But in this case, since we're only looking for one thing, we shouldn't really want, maybe search wasn't the best option then because we don't want groups, we just want one. So they also have one called match in that case. If 0 or more characters at the beginning of a string match the regular expression matter and the corresponding match I return, if the string does not match the pattern. So match only works at the beginning of the string, so I'm not sure if that's what we want either. So looks like search was the only way to do that.
Keep up with the FindAll, you literally just change your if statement to the length of the array.
Mhm.
And use that.
Yep. That's true. We could also keep using the FindAll and just check if the array is full or not. That would still work. Yes. I just want to showcase a lot, a lot of the other regex methods we have.
Or you could use your previous function.
Yep. We could also use our previous functions and have them build on one another. That's a good point. So I'm going to clear the screen and run the test suite again. Forgot to do it verbose, that's okay. So it looks like we failed some tests, and those tests are hide phone numbers and validate, which one? Format phone numbers. So all the tests that we have, methods we have written have passed. So let's talk about hide phone numbers. So it says hide all numbers in a phone number except the last 4 digits. An example of this looks like XXX1234. I don't know how many of you ran into this, but in the test, they actually use capital X's, not lowercase x's. So we'll nip that in the bud and make sure we use the uppercase X's. So so in this case, we don't need to just return a string. We need to actually change it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Read.sub.
Yep. So there's a method called re.sub. And we can take a look there at the documentation again. So return the string obtained by replacing the leftmost non-overlapping occurrences of pattern in string by the replacement REPL. If pattern isn't found, string is returned unchanged. REPL can be a string or a function. If it is a string, any backslash escapes in it are processed. So So in this case, we need to find it. We need to give it a pattern. We need to give it something to replace it with, and we need to give it the string that we're doing. So I know we'll be returning re.sub, and we know that we need, and before we do anything else, we know we're putting input string as the third argument. So what's the pattern that we're looking for, first off?
It's the same thing.
Just the first 6 digits of the phone number. So what we've been using before.
That's right. I'm sorry, yeah, for 6 now.
Yeah, so it's very similar, but we're only getting the first 6 digits and the first 6 digits, not the full number. So in that case, it'll just be /D3 dash /D3. And
Instead of using the \D, is there, other than saying 2 spaces, is there any advantage over using D instead of the brackets that have 0 through 9? Because
yeah.
I mean, I guess you could do brackets 0 through 9. By using -D, you save 2 characters.
yeah, so what Pavel was asking is if there is an advantage using \D instead of saying 0 through 9 like this. And it's effectively the same. I don't, \D does save you, it does save you a couple characters. It's a little more concise, but otherwise, it really comes out to be the same
I
thing.
mean, good if you wanted to like narrow what numbers you wanted to
Yes.
like a certain area codes.
Yeah, like if we knew this phone number had to be, like, there's not going to be a 0 there. We know that, then you can just, edit it so it's 1 through 9. But if we're just expecting any numbers at all, then \D makes just as much sense as 1 through 9. Yes.
I just want to throw out there real quick. They just threw it in the Chicago Python Slack. That's the last chance to register for tonight's sign up for tonight's meetup. For anybody who wanted, you have to sign up ahead of time because there's a security thing going into the building. So I just want to throw that out there. It's last call right now.
Ah, okay, cool. Thank you. Okay. Oop. All right. So we're just for the remote people, they're just talking out. There's a Python meetup here in Chicago that they're taking last-minute registrations for. All right. So
my question about this RegEx pattern would be, this might match not just the beginning, but the end as well, right? Because you have 3 numbers followed by 4 numbers, but it might still get matched with, the first 3 numbers of both plus.
That's a good point.
Like, how do we kind of narrow it down even more than
We put it in the parentheses. That's just that group of 3-3.
Yeah. So if we look here, so we have a regex. It matches these first 3 here automatically. But if we did it if we took these away and did it without the area code, so it was just 8675309, you're right, it does actually pick that up. So the question is, how do we make sure that only the first 6 digits are, if they're there, get hidden? And Daniel mentioned using parentheses. So we got to figure out some way of saying, okay, we want to make sure that nothing else gets captured. So
that's probably a stretch goal, but
yeah, it's an important thing to keep in mind, because these stretch goals are things that can cause minor glitches that destroy an entire system. So let's anyone have any idea of how we can make sure that we don't get this second edge case? I saw someone's hand up.
I was just wondering if you did use the parentheses just to capture that first block as a group, and then you put the dash and then numbers after it, like that exclude, then still just.
Or if you put the dash on the left side of the closing parentheses, maybe that'll work.
Like this, you mean?
Yeah, that's it.
So that gives us everything, including the dash.
You don't want to
But
capture.
it gets
Well-
rid of the second phone number.
I'm
So
It does capture the dash, but is it
What if you put each one individually in parentheses? Would that be the same thing?
each number?
HD really braces 3.
Slash B slash B slash B.
So
As in, like,
parentheses there, your close parentheses, then open before the B.
I see what you mean. So that gives us,
Same.
it still matches. It just gives us 2 match groups.
Right, yeah.
Could you do like ignore Garrett? Like
Yeah.
ignore?
Yeah, so we could. So if we look down here, there's brackets, any single character except these. So if we could do maybe something like, yeah, so I believe it would be, so that gives us the first three numbers and both dashes. So if we look at what we're actually trying to do, right?
The match group is exactly what
We need to replace, 8675311, 8675309 with XXXX, XXXX. If we get that dash, what can we do to make sure it stays there?
Replace it with a dash.
Yeah, we can just replace it with a dash. So in this particular case, I don't think it's going to be a problem. So it looks like we can do that, or this, or actually I don't even know if we need the parentheses in that case. So it looks like this pattern excludes this particular edge case. There may be more edge cases that I don't know about, but it looks like this seems to me like a pretty good solution for now. That's the spec. There we go. So we can. All right. So in any case, we have a pattern. What are we replacing it with?
A string of XXX.
Yeah. In this case, we don't really need to personalize it all, right? It's always going to be the same string, XXXX dash XXXX dash. So we just do. So resub says, all right, find everything that matches this pattern, replace it with this exact string. If we run the tests, actually going to clear the page first. Ran 8 tests, we had 1 failure. So it looks like in that case,
probably the last.
Yep, just the last function. Format phone number. This is the beast. How did people find this one?
I had to use 2 lines instead of 1 line.
All right, so this one gave me a lot of trouble in particular because we need to find a pattern that matches all of these and then change them all to this format. So in this case, we're going to be needing 2 methods. One that finds we need to find every string. We need to, that matches a very broad pattern, and then change them all. And if we look at the phone spec, it wants us to do that without actually changing the full format of the string. So in this case, because I believe it's like even if there was other text in here, we'd want to leave that text intact and just change each of these phone numbers. So first off, let's break this into parts. We need to get all of the phone numbers. So which method allows us to do that?
Oh, just a quick question.
Yes.
You said earlier that if you're given a spec file at a job and you see something wrong with it, don't modify it without asking for permission.
Yeah.
I noticed a discrepancy in the spec file where on line 27 in the previous one, the one that you had open 1 second ago.
Or the phone spec
yeah.
or the phone?
The phone validation field. That's it. On line 27, it has the third phone number is a 312 in parentheses area code.
Yep.
Versus the valid phone spec file does not have the parentheses in the area code at all.
Yeah. So in that case, it looks like that this is a case that they told us to look for, but they aren't actually testing for.
Okay.
So
So that's where we could kind of maybe modify the spec file to include that.
But we're just told to not modify this.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're not necessarily
Yeah.
changing the test file completely. We're just improving it, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can make an assumption.
yeah,
Adding an
I think
edge case.
this is an edge case that was overlooked as opposed to changing what the method should be entirely.
Oh, okay.
It's not fundamentally altering.
It's kind of an addition to an existing
Yeah. So
test requirement. So
you know what? What I'm actually going to do instead of changing that test file, I'm going to add create a new test.
oh,
Test format, phone number, parentheses version. And I'm going to copy this whole string and just add something to the end of it.
That's so more difficult.
Okay, so this is the extra difficult version, and we expect that to return this entire thing along with 312, 777, 8800. There you go. So now you have two tests to pass. One is more difficult than the other. All right, so again, our first step remains unchanged. We need to get all of these phone numbers so that we can match them all once we are, well, I'm sorry. Let me back that up a bit. So we need to find a pattern that will match all of those. Because if we find a pattern that will match all of those, then we can just call sub on it. So the question is getting that pattern. So we can test this out in Rubular again. Let's get a few, so 111, 111, 1111, 222 dot 222 dot 2222. What are the other ones that they wanted to look at? And so we want to find a pattern that can match all three of these. So there's a so we can't just do /D3 in this case because there might be something before that, right? So first we need to say there may or may not be one thing before the first number. How can we do that?
The dot is a universal character.
So that could be any single character of anything.
so
Or if we just have a parenthesis, we could just do parenthesis question mark.
question.
Yeah, so we could, so there's also question mark, which I'm not actually sure it's here. Oh, there it is. 0 or 1 of something. So this will say this could exist, this might not exist. So we could do something like there might be something there, there might not be.
The problem with that is that the dots will also match space.
Oh, it'll
That's
also
why
match a
we use
space.
parentheses specific. That's what we see as one of our test cases, right? Instead of making it so open-ended.
So I think we need to escape a parentheses in that case. So that says 0 or more of a parentheses, so we get everything in between each number. That's okay. All right. So in that case, I think now we can look for the first 3 digits because there's nothing. Oh, sure. Sorry. Thank you. So we know from this particular test case that there might be a parentheses before the first number. but we don't want to put just get a parentheses here because it might not exist. So the question mark says, if something is there, capture it, otherwise don't worry about it. And since the thing we're particularly looking for is a parentheses, then we wanted to specify this thing because we don't think anything else will come before the first number. But because a parentheses usually goes for capture everything enclosed, we need to add that backslash to escape it, saying, no, we just want to read this as a parentheses, not as a special character. Exactly. All right, so that's a start. Now we can do our first 3 digits because there shouldn't be anything changing that.
Now for this, because we're doing a formatting thing, do we want to put parentheses to capture those 3 digits? And because we want to not worry about those stuff that's in there, right?
Perhaps, but let's see if we can capture each number first. If we can do that, then we can worry about grouping them. All right, so first 3 digits, and then it could be followed by nothing, could be followed by a dot, could be followed by parentheses and a white space. So now now that's a little bit more wiggle room here.
So since we use optionals already,
Mhm.
just go ahead and use them for characters.
Yeah.
Which may or may not exist between the groups of 3 and 4 digits. Well, 3 and 3 and 4.
Yeah. So in this case, we need to plan for both there being nothing, a dot, or parentheses space. So so maybe we could say, could be a dot, could be a parentheses. So yeah, so there's one, backslash uppercase D, any non-digit. So this is just anything that isn't a number. So this could also give us letters. I don't think that may not be likely to happen. So we can try that. But there may or may not be one, so we can do a question mark. We also want to have the option for there being a space after that, right?
Use the asterisks.
Would you do 2 since there may or may not be 2? For like that last case, there's like the close paren.
It could be 1 or 2. Or I believe that's how it works, right? I'm doing that correctly. 1 to 2, between 1 and 2 of anything, but we can see here it looks like that didn't work out. It didn't capture the white space.
We do plus instead of the 1.
Oh yeah, just put
So
plus sign.
D plus question mark.
So if we do that, looks like it ignores the white space and it ignores the first 3 digits here. So we still need to have that option of there not being anything. But if we're going to assume that extra something might be just white space, there is something that says /s, any white space character. So we could also say there might be white space, but there might not be. All right, so that should get us to the next 3 digits. And so once we get to the next 3 digits, again, there might be a dot, there might be a dash. There could also be a space. So maybe we want to do /uppercase D again. And then we can do our last 4. Okay. Provisionally, this looks okay. We may need to edit it a couple more times as we test it, but this did capture the entire number of our 3 test cases here. That's a lot. But we can save it, say pattern equals all right. So now the question was raised of we need to change each of these in a particular way. And one thing, so the easiest way to do that is with the sub method, but the sub method doesn't actually doesn't let you take a regex example. It'll just literally replace it with the regex pattern you give it. So it can take either a string, but it can also take a function that returns a function. And kind of in the interest of time, I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit because we've been here an hour, but we're so close to the end of this, I want to do that. So I'm just going to say, we're going to return re.sub pattern. That's where our method's going to go, input string. And I'm going to make a method called replace that takes a string as an argument. So we're going to get a string that looks like one of these, and we're going to change it apart. So this is something we've done before. There's a few ways we could do this, right? So we could do something like, first off, we want to get rid of anything that's not a number. Because if we just have the numbers, then it's easier to work with. So I could call this stripped string and call re.sub again. And this time, all we're looking for is any non-digit character. So that'll be, yep, \D. And we're going to be replacing it with just empty string, taking string as a method. And then if we want to insert something into the string, one way we can do that is by turning it into a list. Because if we turn it into a list, then we can manipulate it and then join together back into a string.
Or we could do string interpolation.
We can also do string interpolation. Sorry, I'm just thinking about that for a second. So it would be string.
Since we can access them by ranges,
Mhm.
we could do strip string that opens square brackets like 0 to 3, and then 3 to 6, and then 6 to 10.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So we could do like new string equals, I totally forgot how to do string interpolation. Yeah, it is F. Okay. Yep.
Oh yeah, not
Either way.
do string.
Also, I'm seeing something in the chat. Oh, yeah. So Brian has a good guide for us right here.
Brian is even a better syntax there without any zeros.
Yeah. So strip string. There's an implicit 0 there.
The dash.
Yeah. Yeah, this works.
Square bracket.
Oh, thank you. And then that's. I didn't even think of that. That's a really good. That's a really elegant solution. Thank you, guys. And that's actually just what we need to return. So we return this interpolated string with ranges of that separated by dashes, and we pass this function as an argument to re.sub, saying everything we find with that pattern, call this function on it and replace it with the return value of this function. So we can try our test now. Hopefully we had some errors. Let's see what they are. Let's see here, validate phone spec. What's the error? Return resub pattern. Expected string or byte type error, expected string or bytes-like object. Line 192, line 33 in our re.sub thing. Something's wrong with this. It says, so I'm looking at it, the error says,
It could be, we need to loop over each and every one. Or did we?
that's what resub should do that for us.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, resub just says, call this function on each thing that you find matching this pattern.
So strip string right now, like when we run line 33, does it have all the strings? All
Yeah.
the phone numbers?
It should be past each phone number in turn.
It could be that on line 30 when you call replace function.
Oh yeah.
You don't have the parentheses for the input of the
Oh.
input string.
Yeah, you're right. I wasn't telling it what to call it on. Good catch. All right, now we have 2 failures, which is better than 2 errors.
Awesome.
All right, so it says, so if we look at this, we can see what it expected and see what it got. So I was expecting this. Instead, it got, so 312, 222. All right, so something went very strange here. So it looks like we didn't, it looks like we kind of maybe have gotten some things that we didn't mean to capture. Because we got 312, that first kind of 4 things work. Oh, we got another thing in the chat. Strip string is a string instead of an array. And I think we want it to be a string because we should still be able to access each part of strip string. Whoops.
Or is it because it's a now continuous string and like it's not like each number is not separated, so they are like a one long string that has not been separated by comma or anything, so yeah, they all run across one another.
So I believe, so if I'm understanding the sub method correctly, what's happening is that resub is supposed to loop over the test string, find each thing that matches the pattern, and replace it with the return value of this function. So I'm not sure if the problem is replace or if the problem is with our pattern that was searching for things and that picked up more than we thought it would. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I think the problem is pattern in 29 grade. Or it's a pattern in 33.
Yeah, generally, my guess is with the pattern. So let's see if I try to do. So if I tried to do that, now that looks good the way it's done there. All right, so it's 9:04 already. So let's take a break. Come back at come back at like 9:12. And I'm going to keep looking at this, and if I find the reason for what's going on, I'll let you know. All right.
Hated that last one.
Yeah, it's a tough one.